Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensive Christian university in North America. My name is Brian Perez, and we are live on this Wednesday, the 13th of November. Give us a call if you've got a question about the Bible, the Christian faith. We'll answer just about anything that's on your mind. The number to call until 4 p.m. Pacific time today is 888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also send in your questions online on Facebook, Instagram, or on kwave.com. That's our flagship radio station's website. More details about that later. Right now, I want to introduce the panel of pastors who will be answering your questions today. In the studio with me is Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and joining us online via Skype from his home church in Charlotte, North Carolina, Dr. Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church. Welcome, gentlemen, to the program.
Good to be with you guys.
Well, thank you very much. Great to be here. We are missing one component of this team.
I'm sure he's en route.
And I'm sure he's en route. The other great doctor, Ed Stetzer. Yeah, I went to Talbot today, Bobby, and met up with Ed for a bit. Brian, you'll like this one. I met and shook the hand of Carmen Imes.
Oh, cool.
Because I've never had, a face-to-face encounter with her. I've only been with her on the Skype deal. Yeah, it was really nice to meet her. She's such a really, really nice lady. And she's going to be coming on this screen tomorrow with my wife.
Oh, okay.
She's going to be on Women Worth Knowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was my morning beside saturating my brain in the English Reformation. And gosh, there's so many amazing twists and turns in the English Reformation. You just look at, Tyndale, of course, is such a hero of that. But you look at Henry VIII, and from Henry, his son Edward VI becomes his successor, but Edward dies young at the age of 15, and then Mary, his daughter from Catherine of Aragon, takes the throne, and she becomes known historically as Bloody Mary. 300 martyrs burned at the stake during her time. Jeez. And it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
This history is intense, Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's where my head's been for the last few hours. And
whoever said history was a boring subject?
Oh, yeah. I think, there are people that can make it boring, but then there are people that can make it so exciting.
Yeah.
And that's why my favorite podcast is The Rest of History, or The Rest is History podcast.
Don't you mean your second favorite podcast?
Next to
Women Worth Knowing.
Women Worth Knowing. Yeah,
yes.
I love that one too. But that is really more of a history podcast itself. Even though occasionally they do have people, who are alive and well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, The Rest is History is fascinating because there's just so many historical periods that are amazing, and you've got two super sharp guys talking about it, and they're also really witty and funny, so it just makes it really entertaining. So, yeah.
Very good. So, Brian's all-time favorite podcast, Women Worth Knowing, is hosted by Cheryl Brodersen and Robin Jones-Gunn, and tomorrow's guest is going to be Carmen Imes, and then that episode will be produced, and everything else it'll be available later in the future. But in the meantime, you can catch up on past episodes. Just look it up online. Women Worth Knowing.
I think the current episode is Henrietta Mears, who was such a fascinating woman, who was really, really influential in the lives of many Christian leaders that many of us would know. Well, Billy Graham, for one. She was tremendously influential in Billy Graham's life, in the life of Francis Schaeffer, and other great leaders from previous generations. So, did you ever connect with Henrietta Mears, Bobby?
No, I did not get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
But I am wondering if you're able to connect with me. Speaking of English history, I'm wondering if I'm taking on the appearance of George Whitefield in a cross-eyed fashion as I'm looking through my camera. Is it better if I look at this screen or if I look at this screen?
If you look up, you kind of look like an image of, you know, that one meme where the guy's standing there among this group of people and he's kind of looking up and he's saying something and everybody always puts like what he's saying there. You kind of look like that guy if you look up, but.
All right, so this is better like this.
Yeah, look down. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's more looking at
You
the
look
people.
humbler if you look down, you know.
Yes. Well, I definitely, that's the appearance I'd like to take on then versus haughty.
Speaking of humble,
The
humble,
The most humble man in the universe.
embodiment of humility. That's what I am.
just walked in the door.
It's true.
It's Dr. Ed Stetzer, the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at the aforementioned Biola University.
Aforementioned. You know that our
love using that
mutual
word.
friend, John Dixon, who's
Yes.
taught at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, taught you, I think, in your graduate program.
No, he never did.
He never did. We didn't overlap. Okay.
missed it, yeah.
And we're teaching at Oxford together in
Yes.
you, me, and him in
Yes.
3 weeks.
I can't wait.
However, he literally wrote the book on humility. So he wrote a book called Humilitas,
Did
you know, because in the Roman Empire,
Yes.
humility wasn't a value.
Wasn't a good
One of
thing.
the Christianity's revolutions
Yeah.
is actually the bringing in of humility. So when we think of humility, John Dixon wrote the book on it, but right over there, our friend Bobby Conway is the embodiment of it. When you look in the encyclopedia next to humility, it's Bobby Conway's picture.
Maybe this is Bobby's biography.
It is. It is.
So I got to tell you, Ed, you know, thanks for the little tour of your campus today. That was great to be there with you and my friend, not Adam, but Anthony.
Yes, but it's always going to be Adam to me. But I only called him Adam once, but now I remember he's an Old Testament scholar, so he's got to be
So
Adam.
it's got to be Adam, yeah.
Is Anthony even in the Bible?
Tony, I mean, come on.
Tony?
You know, Tony's in the Bible.
Tony's in the Bible? Tony? I'm going through my Bible characters. I don't remember a Tony.
The Antonia Fortress, you know,
Yeah,
it's talked
yeah.
about in the New Testament. But anyway, as we were parting from you, he turned to me and he said, "Man, how much coffee do you think Ed drank today?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, Ed doesn't drink coffee.
It's true.
He doesn't need coffee. He's naturally this hyper."
Well, I will tell you, and if he's listening right now, there are very few people in the world who can text me and say, "Hey, can you show my friend around campus tomorrow?" And I had between 2 meetings.
Yes. You're so kind.
And well, I'm not so kind,
You're
but
just, well, you're kind to me. You're
but
just
we're friends.
a great friend.
We're friends. I would love to. I mean, again, so I hope I wasn't too hurried for.
No.
Anthony.
You know, like he said, he lived in Israel 20 years.
He's used to New Yorkers.
Rude people. He's used to it.
New
He
York,
doesn't
New
face it.
Yorkers. I mean, it is funny. Like when I went to Israel the first time, not the second time, but the first time, Donna was like, "The people here all the Jewish people are kind of like they sound like New Yorkers and they talk like New Yorkers." I said, "Because Donna, they are New Yorkers. I mean, there's a huge the largest population of Jews outside of Israel is actually New York City, where I grew up."
Yes.
So it was fascinating. So well, it's maybe too much. I will try to have less caffeine
No.
when I see your friends
great.
next time.
No, I
but
loved
thanks
it.
for coming around campus. Did it surprise you? You've been on campus. You've been on campus
Oh,
before.
yeah. I've been on campus
Yeah.
before. Yeah. I actually did a pastor's perspective on campus one time.
I didn't know that. We should do that
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, quite a few years ago.
And you
We
just
did
like
it
the fact
together,
that
right?
Calvary
Nah, I think that was before my time.
before is there a time? Is there a pastor's?
It was before your time. Yeah.
Yes. So Calvary Chapel is the name of the chapel.
Yeah,
on campus,
I'm just
which
so
is
glad
strange.
that we could provide that name.
Well, you know,
for
actually,
you
the
guys.
word Calvary preceded Chuck Smith and the Calvary Chapel movement. So
You're kidding.
life begins at Calvary. I've heard a song of that as well. On
So
that
at the
hill far
Biola
away.
University dorm rooms,
Yes.
is there like a room set aside for where John Thune was once a student?
Okay, so did you mention? So John Thune is
I
the
haven't.
new
I was waiting for you to get here.
majority leader for the Senate, and he's a Biola University graduate. So we're excited for him in this role. He's a good, godly man. And it's about to step into a very challenging situation. So he's the Senate Majority Leader. Mitch McConnell was the former Senate Majority. Most people, if they know politics, they know Mitch McConnell. They might not know as well John Thune, but we're excited to have our graduate now in this role.
Where's he a senator?
South Dakota, North Dakota, one of those, one of the Dakotas.
Yeah.
They should have one Dakota. Like, I'm not sure who decided you needed 2 Dakotas, but there are 2.
Well, you know, you can let President Trump know. He probably could change that.
He could. He actually, he's changing a lot. Yes. He's changing a lot. And if you want to call and talk about that, it's 888-564-6173. Actually, Bobby and I handled the day after the election while you were gallivanting around Europe.
Yes.
We handled. Did you vote? Did you vote by
I did.
early voting?
I've gotten home in time to vote.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you mean? We were like literally on the radio. So you were in the country sleeping while Bobby and I were handling the post-election.
No, what was I doing?
I don't think you were. You were out of the country. You weren't in here.
No, I was here because I did vote, but then I think I had to go somewhere immediately. Oh yeah, I did. I had to go. That was last week, right?
It was last week. Yeah,
yeah.
Thanks for keeping up.
No, I had a 3-day meeting I had to attend. So yes,
Whatever.
I got.
You just didn't want to be here the day.
I got home Friday and I voted Monday, and then I got in my car and drove away.
Election
I
day's
voted Saturday,
Tuesday.
actually.
Election day's Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I voted Saturday.
Okay, so you voted early. Remember my question
did.
about 7 minutes ago? So I said, when I said, did you vote early? The answer is yes.
I'm trying to remember what I did. It's kind of.
If you'd like to ask Brian Broderson about what he did yesterday, the number is 888-564-6173. I'm not sure he'd remember.
Maybe you know what Brian did yesterday, and you can call
I know
him
what he
and
did
remind
this
him.
morning. He came to campus and brought someone around who said that I had too much caffeine.
This must be true.
No, he really liked you, and he found that it was helpful. You know, just some of the advice you gave him. He was happy about that.
Good guy.
888-564-6173. We will go to the phones in just a little bit. First, at least one question that was sent in online. Actually, we're going to do two because Christy in South Carolina, should there be just one Carolina, Ed?
I think
That's another thing Donald Trump can
actually
change.
has to do with something that's a little more makes sense. There's
Yes.
history. There's a
Yes,
war.
of course.
Anyway.
But Christy sent in her questions. Number one, who is the prince in the final chapters of Ezekiel? What do you think, Brian?
In the final chapters of Ezekiel, so chapter 40 through the end, which is 48, is a picture of the millennial kingdom. And the prince, some people think it would be the Lord, but I'm not sure about that. I think it could be one of the Davidic princes that is restored, maybe like somebody like Zerubbabel. The Lord, talks about a future for Zerubbabel. We don't know if that is literal or maybe just figurative. So yeah, there's a Davidic prince. Could be Jesus, but at the same time, it's, the Lord is sitting upon the throne in Jerusalem, and I think that's probably more of a reference to Jesus. So honestly, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay, then. We'll get to Christy's next question, which is
Well,
let me
more
say, too, that
involved. There are three main interpretations. It's the Messiah or Christ, the king and leader of Israel, or a regular king. Mm-hmm. So I think the reason she's asking is it's not particularly clear. And sometimes prophecy is not that clear. This is one of those things where it's not that clear. But I do think it relates to the millennial kingdom as well.
Christy's other question is about a topic that one of her daughters-in-law keeps bringing up as she's been discussing it with other people lately, and that is the validity of Paul's epistles. And Christy sent me a link to this website here that I have on the screen that shows just pages and pages, a list of contradictory and incompatible statements. Bobby Conway, are you familiar with this controversy surrounding Paul? Some of the things that he said that Jesus contradicted, or vice versa. What do you know?
Well, I'm not familiar with the document that she sent, but it's certainly been a debate amongst New Testament scholarship with liberals versus, Christians. And anytime we would have people that are non-Christians, they're going to seek to diminish the reliability of the scriptures. Why do we believe in the authority of Paul? He identifies himself as the author on a number of occasions. Peter, validated his writings. And the problem that people have, and the early church did as well, for that matter, but the problem that people have with it is they'll see that he's at odds with Jesus on some of the teachings that he offers, but it's not that he's at odds with Jesus. The spirit that Jesus sent is inspiring him because he encountered the resurrected Messiah. And what's happening is he is offering further revelation. So progressive revelation is God's unfolding of himself in the process of time. And when Jesus came with his death, he inaugurated the new covenant. And what Paul seeks to do is make sense of what the new covenant looks like. So Jesus comes to fulfill the old covenant, and then he inaugurates it with his death. And then Paul begins to show us how the Christian life connects to the new covenant lived out in our daily life.
Brian or Ed, care to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, like Bobby said, this is not anything new. People have been doing this, pitting Jesus against Paul and Paul against Jesus for a long time. Funny enough, I was teaching Sunday morning, and I was teaching about justification by faith. Romans 5:4, to the one who does not work but believes in the one who justifies the ungodly, their faith is accounted as righteousness. And I just happened to mention, people will say that, Paul sort of made this up. Jesus didn't teach this. Jesus didn't teach justification by faith. And then I just said, but what about when Jesus was asked by a group of people, what can we do to do the work of God? And his response was, this is the work of God. Believe in the one whom he has sent. So Jesus didn't elaborate on this doctrine that we would call it a doctrine of justification by faith, but he certainly stated it without developing it like the apostle did.
Yeah, and I would add that the common particularly description is that Jesus was preaching the gospel of the kingdom of God, and then Paul was preaching more of a gospel of justification, for example, and more. And there does feel like there's a difference in what's going on here, and I think part of that has to do with that Jesus was coming and teaching within this particularly cultural context and pointing people to the kingdom, but we do see, things like, to as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. Or you must be born again. That Paul then gives elaboration to this, of what this looks like to have new life in Christ and to live that kingdom life. So it would be fair to say that when you read the Gospels, it talks a lot about the kingdom of God, and you read the epistles, it talks differently. I think that the challenge is probably, I think she mentioned it was her daughter or daughter-in-law. I think your daughter-in-law is struggling with the authority of Scripture, which I understand, and everybody sort of likes the teachings of Jesus. They like the teachings of Jesus that they read. There's parts of them they don't read. There's some pretty hard words that Jesus says.
Yeah.
But, everyone, you can always tell people are quoting Jesus when they don't read the Bible a lot, when they quote King James, like, judge not, lest ye be judged. That's like the only verse that some people know. So, people like to remake Jesus in their own image. It's really hard to remake Paul in your own image. Paul lays out these ethics lived out in the Christian life and more. So I think at the end of the day, as you're having this discussion, if I can just code this from a pastoral level, it might be just okay to say to her, hey, listen, I get it. You're not tracking where Paul is. Paul says things you don't agree about. Let's talk about what Jesus said. And let's start by reading the Gospel of John and talk about some of that's there. And then you're going to come across some things like John chapter 3, you must be born again, or you're going to cross something about, leaving father and mother and following me. And then you see what that might look like by reading the rest of the Bible. But I think it's probably from a pastoral perspective, convincing her that Paul and Jesus are aligned if she's not a Christian is probably not going to be the strategy that leads to a better conversation.
Christy, thank you for sending in your questions on the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger. Let's do another one that was sent in online, this one through kwave.com, before we go to the phones at 888-564-6173. Rosalia says, my family and I are wondering what your thoughts are on believers adopting therapists into their lifestyles. My family and I have heard a lot of positive testimony from leaders we respect who have adopted the practice. It's our understanding that these therapists operate in the vein of mentorship and accountability. Our reservations would be that not all believers can afford this as a lifestyle practice, so I'm not sure if it would seem insensible to suggest this to believers. We don't have a firm opinion on therapy practice adopted as a lifestyle, just hoping to learn what your insights might be. So I guess it's something maybe some Christians are budgeting for nowadays, a therapist.
Yeah, and I would say that not every, like I just came from a meeting. We were talking about one of our programs. We have a marriage and family therapy program, a master's degree at Biola University, plus the Rosemead School of Psychology is there. So we would be very pro therapy in appropriate circumstances. I think her question, as she framed it, therapy as lifestyle, seems that probably, I don't know, I might say, again, very pro therapy, but I don't think like everybody needs therapy. I don't think I don't think therapists think everybody needs therapy. Maybe even some of that description was maybe some life coaching. It's not the worst thing. Having a mentor, having a spiritual director. One of the things we have at Talbot is like all of our students have the opportunity to get spiritual direction. We think that's really important. We have this amazing Institute for Spiritual Formation there. So a lot of what is that, or she or he? Rosalia. With what Rosalia said, a lot of that seems to be something that you would want to have a spiritual advisor, a mentor, a discipler in your life. And I'm for all that. I think tomorrow morning I'll speak to a group of psychotherapists here and their pastors here in, I don't even know, it's in Orange County, Santa Ana. So in Santa Ana, I don't know what the name of the group is, but there's like 140, 150 of them coming. And I'm thankful for them, but I tend to see therapists as I send someone to therapist when they need therapy. Therapy implies pathology or sickness or something struggle to be overcome that can't be overcome by simple maybe sort of mentoring and encouragement. I think most of what Rosalia said is mentoring, encouragement, and spiritual direction. And again, that's why we're trying to train all of the pastors and nonprofit leaders coming out of at Talbot in that through our Institute of Spiritual Formation, because Brian, you know this, a lot of pastors are not spiritually healthy. But then I would say therapists should require therapy, and therapy implies something, pathology, something they're working through that they need more help in. So that I would say probably therapist is lifestyle, not something that, because I think most people, you're right, can't afford it.
Mm-hmm. Brian or Bobby?
Oh, well, I would just say from experience, I've spent 40 plus years talking with people, counseling with people, and most people you're able to help through biblical counseling, life experience, advice, prayer. But then there are those occasional situations where you recognize, they need something beyond what I'm able to give them here. Mm-hmm. And so I have recommended a psychologist, a psychiatrist in some cases, a therapist at times. But for me, it's been more the exception rather than the rule, not because I'm against it, but because I think sometimes people just think, I need this when they maybe don't. But then there are some that do. And so, and maybe today people need therapy more than they used to need it. I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of people today that are gravitating toward that. We talk about the crisis with COVID and just some of the different things in the culture that have led. People often talk about the mental illness, the increase of mental illness in the culture. I'm not totally sure that I agree that that's the case, but there's definitely something that
you don't think there's been an increase in mental health issues?
Well, I just wonder if it's not an increase in diagnosis or labeling, and now everybody's got a mental illness.
Well, I do think there's overdiagnosis, but I would also be of the view that really the difficult times have caused some, anxiety issues and other issues. But
I think
but
so.
I do think like some things are just like, like ADD, passing out medication. ADD is real. But passing out medication to everybody who has a problem focusing is not the answer to those things.
Yeah, because I never had medication and I've never been able to focus. So
that's true. Right. Well, you would know if you had ADHD. It's more than just I can't focus.
Bobby's got ADHD and all the other.
Do you have ADHD, Bobby? Is that a true story?
And all the other acronyms.
Yeah. I've got a litany of issues, but I would say I like what you guys are saying. I do think that there's a couple thoughts that I would say as it relates to it. There's some mental health issues, for example, like borderline personality disorder. That's a beast because that kind of is mental health on steroids. I mean, as far as it kind of encompasses a lot of other issues with it. And that type of person, if they're financially able, it might be good to have, a monthly session or so after they kind of figure out what's going on because of the nature of that. Other things like what you said, Ed, ADD or general anxiety, I think some of that stuff is not lifelong and debilitating. And borderline personality disorder doesn't have to be, it just tends to be, especially if somebody with that turns to alcohol or drug use. The percentage of people with that attempt suicide at one time in their life is astronomical. And basically taking drugs is basically inviting a gun to your head. I mean, if you have that as a disorder, it's just playing with absolute fire, but yet the agony of that person, they feel their skin is so thin. They go through relationships like crazy. So there's all kinds of trauma that they have, and it's very difficult for them to feel safe, and that people have a hard time getting close because they feel like they're walking on eggshells. So I think that when it comes to just normal counseling, if a counselor tells you you're going to need to do this the rest of your life, they need to really justify that, because counselors are trying to make an income, and I understand that, but they don't need to make an income at the expense of taking people through unnecessarily counseling for the rest of their life. That's not wise. I think it should be the counselor's goal to see you not in counseling for the rest of your life. It's a tool. It's something that we turn to for help in a very difficult time of struggle. And then the last thing I would say is be careful with counselors as well, because a lot of them, and I've seen them, they'll go and they'll get their master's degree in counseling, and they haven't even read through the Bible, or they're not good on their theology. And so they have awareness of neuroscience to a degree and some mental health stuff, but they start speaking in terms of all the most modern day therapy stuff. And then they end up leveraging tools that kind of theologically don't fit. So I feel like if you can find a counselor that is a theologian, that can go a long way. Somebody that's really trained to know their Bible, and they're thinking scripture first or thinking theology first. And then they use some of the modern day, scientific discoveries in neuroscience, and it comes alongside as a tool to kind of sharpen what they're going through. I think that's much more advantageous.
I think this is and again, I recognize that this is sponsored by Biola.edu, but I think that this is why what we want to look for is counselors, not just counselors who are Christians, but well-trained Christian counselors. And so, again, in my school, Talbot School of Theology, we have the Marriage and Family Therapy Program because we want well-formed theology. They take theology, they take classes in Bible, and so they come out being able to counsel well, but also from a Christian worldview. But in our case, there's both the MFT program at Talbot and the Rosemead School of Psychology. In our case, they also are, we're accredited by and approved in the state. For licensure, to receive insurance, those kinds of things, and I think that's something we've prioritized. So I think Christian counseling makes a big difference, and I'm a big fan and in favor of it as well. Now, again, I think some people, people might want to ask questions about that. 888-564-6173. I just like giving the number 888-564-6173. But I do think that again. Therapy is lifestyle, probably. I mean, maybe if you're like super rich and you just want to talk to someone about your struggles, but man, go to church and get in a small group, and the Lord will use that. And again, and if that doesn't, if there's places that you're stuck, like your long-term depression or high levels of anxiety, that's what counseling and therapy is for.
The way it was phrased in the email, too, adopting therapists into their lifestyle makes me think of like a personal trainer or something.
Yeah, I think that's what you refer to.
If you have the money to afford one, you do.
Like
otherwise,
some
you just
super rich person, like saying, I saw my therapist this week, and I guess it would be nice to be able to have someone to talk through all your struggles and problems with. For most people, that's a person in your small group, an older mentor, something like that.
Like having a maid.
Rosalia, thanks for sending in your question
Rosalia.
via the kwave.com Pastor's Perspective page. There's a form there that you can fill out to send your question in, but the best way to get an answer is to call us when we're here live, like today, Wednesday, the 13th of November, until 4 p.m. Pacific time. The number to call is
Oh, 888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173.
He had one job.
I had one job. I didn't expect him to throw it to me. All right,
You always got to be ready.
I'm always ready. In season and
It's like, yes, exactly. 888-564-6173. This is Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America, and the alma mater of the incoming House Majority Leader, John Thune.
Is that what we're going to lead like every time?
That's going to be our new thing.
We probably don't want.
We should have John in the studio before he gets super busy.
You know, he's like 9 feet tall. Like he's like super tall.
Interesting.
So I'm not going to Google right now. How tall is John Thune? But, it is kind of fun though to have somebody who's
tall.
a committed Christian. Not tall. He's 6'4". So he's 6'4". So these are the things that we teach you here on Pastor's Perspective. How tall is the Majority Leader of the Senate?
What was something I was watching the other day, and they were talking about somebody's height too. Actually, it was a documentary on Trump. Trump's pretty tall.
Yeah, you know the presidents on this is a weird fact. The presidents on average are 3 inches taller than Americans throughout their history.
So how can they relate to us?
Well, so one of the things that has been written about that is one of the reasons is people say that people assume people who are taller are better leaders. Which Napoleon would like to differ about this as well, but that's kind of the thing. So the presidents are on average. Well, I don't even know that. That's what I was told.
I think the Korean guys would differ with us on that.
Taller than average. All right, I'm timing it right now to see the exact number. This is the quality information that we bring to you. Abraham Lincoln was 6'4".
Yeah.
James Madison was 5'4".
Oh,
and I want to say that we love everybody of every height. This is not a bad thing. So
you can't say you didn't learn anything new today on Pastor's Perspective.
That's true.
But if you
it is. Presidents have trended to be taller over time, which is kind of interesting. So we're getting taller presidents as we go. So, but for you short kings out there, we're for you, man.
Absolutely.
We're for you.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you want to call and talk about short people, 888.
No, we're not going to do that.
6173.
I know a song about that.
Yes. We can talk about Zacchaeus. He was
It says folk
wee
wisdom
little man.
about. This is Wikipedia, so they can't put it on Wikipedia unless it's accurate.
Uh-huh.
It says folk wisdom about U.S. presidential politics hold that the taller of the two major party candidates always wins, or almost always wins. It's a topic among popular writers, et cetera, et cetera. And so the one I saw was 3 inches taller on average, but it's not showing up here. But it's in Ray Bradbury's book, Fahrenheit 451. I don't know. That's where I've seen it. But it's a thing. I'm telling you, it's a thing.
So that's why Trump beat Hillary.
I don't know. I think there might be other reasons.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, you kind of threw that right out there.
I'm just saying.
All right.
888-564-6173. Unison. I love
stereo,
it.
baby.
In stereo. That's right. For you guys listening on FM. AM 1110, sorry that wasn't in stereo, but for the FM listeners, it was. George in Ukaipa watching us on YouTube. Hi there, George. You had a question about Zechariah and Mary. Go ahead.
Yes. I wanted to know what was the difference between the two when the angel told Zacharias that he was his wife was going to be with child, but he shut Zacharias' mouth. When he told Mary.
Yes.
Did we lose him?
Are you there, George?
I think we lost him.
We lost you after you said, but when he told Mary. Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Did you press mute on your phone?
please.
That could be it. Bobby,
okay.
go ahead and take it. What's the difference?
Bobby's ready.
Well, I mean, I think that the difference is you have one that's struggling with doubt and unbelief, and you have another that has a question. So Mary asks a question, how can this be? But it wasn't rooted in unbelief and doubt. Whereas Zacharias, he thinks this is impossible, and that's rooted in unbelief and doubting God. And so just because somebody asks a question doesn't mean that they're struggling with doubt. It just means they're curious about the process or the how or the why.
Sounds good.
Agreeing with the man.
George.
Bobby's got it. This is why he's the 1 minute apologist. He did it in 1 minute and he's right.
Dr. Bobby Conway.
Yeah, that was about a minute, right?
It was the 1 minute apologist, baby, right there. You can find more at 1minuteapologist.com with Dr. Bobby Conway coming your way all day, all night here on K-Wave Radio.
We were just talking about AM radio off the air, too.
Yeah, there you go.
888-564-6173. Thank you, George, for calling in. And now let's talk to Tosha in Ohio. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you guys?
Doing well.
I'm calling in. I've been listening for a little while, thanks to a good friend of mine.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm newer in studying what the real Christian faith means and studying the word and not just coming to my own conclusions based on my own experiences. So I was reading in Hebrews 6, where our forerunner Jesus has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So I started to kind of look. Me and my friend were talking about the Archangel Michael last night, and a couple of things that I saw referred to Melchizedek as being Michael, the Archangel, and I saw it's only written 4 times in the Bible, so I just wanted to know a little more about that.
Okay, Brian, what do you say?
How are you connecting Melchizedek with Michael?
Well, when I started to Google it and just started to kind of see what some of the references said, it was saying that it was actually Michael, but it was also a son of Enoch, and there were a couple of different references, and that's why I was getting kind of confused, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes the internet will confuse you.
Unless it's Wikipedia.
It does.
Right, Ed?
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. So there's no connection between the two. Melchizedek was an actual person who was the king of Salem back in the time of Abraham. He came after Abraham's battle and defeating these kings, and Abraham brought a tithe to him, and he blessed Abraham. And so he's mentioned in Genesis chapter 14. And then the only other mention is he just suddenly appears out of nowhere in Psalm 110, which is a messianic psalm, which says, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." And then the author of Hebrews picks up on that in, I think, the 5th chapter is where he appears first, and all the way through the 7th. He was a historical person. Hebrews sometimes can be a little confusing because it says he neither had beginning of days nor end of life, which doesn't mean that he was, eternal. It just means that there's no record of his lineage, and that was intentional so that Jesus would become a priest like him. So he's a human priest in history. Hebrews tells us that he was the king of righteousness, he was the king of peace, and he was really a type of Christ. And Christ is a priest, not after the order of Levi, which the other priests were, but he's a priest after this order of Melchizedek.
So there's nothing like special or supernatural about Melchizedek.
Now, I don't think so. Some people think he's
people like me think there's something more going on
that he's
there.
A pre-incarnate, kind of appearance of Christ.
Christophany or something like that, where there's a picture of Christ.
Yeah, some people get that wrong, but
some people do get it wrong.
That's okay.
Now leave Tasha alone too. So Tasha, here's a little more information. The Qumran scrolls actually mention Archangel Michael and Melchizedek as same person and used in different names. That's outside of the Bible.
Right.
So my guess is that may be where, I think, go ahead, Tasha, you were talking?
Well, I think that's maybe what I found. And so what I was kind of thinking was maybe now that I heard what you have to say on that, maybe that's some way for Jesus to almost validate that or to pay it homage to something that is just more to be learned after, we meet him in person.
Yeah, so what I would say is the scrolls are fascinating, and I think that I love that you're reading that, but because Melchizedek is kind of a weird dude. I mean, it's like, what is this? Who's this king of Salem? Who's this? Why are we giving tithes to him? And so you wouldn't be surprised that somebody in a scroll, which scrolls aren't all right. So somebody, 2,000 years ago said, I wonder if they're the same person, which is kind of, I think, what you're asking. What I would say is that biblical scholars don't tend to see them as the same person. There is a little bit of a Catholic tradition that had to do, not the same person, but the connection between the two. So what I would say is, though I think Brian and I might not be 100% on the same page, that Melchizedek to me might be some more than just this king.
And I have thought that in the past.
Yeah, it's debatable.
Yeah.
I was probably really into Christophanies once, and I love, the captain of the army of the Lord and Joshua 5 and that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm less into it now.
No, I was too.
Yeah. I think we all go through.
And there was a time I probably would have argued that he was a pre-incarnate.
We go through these phases. So, but what I would say is, you probably picked it up from one scroll, and one scroll doth not a biblical teaching make. But I love that. And what I would say to you, I love that you're researching these things. But I would say it's a little rabbit trail. You ended up kind of on a pretty, not a little, that's a pretty big rabbit trail to be Archangel Michael Melchizedek. There's so many wonderful things to learn about theology that I would probably stay on a more theologically rooted path and be careful of the side trails as well. Bobby, first of all, you got to weigh in on the Melchizedek debate that's taking place right here live on Pastor's Perspective. And then if you want to address the Melchizedek connection to Archangel Michael, that's great too.
Well, I'm enjoying the debate here. I think
you need to take a position. We don't just enjoy the debate. We take a stand here on Pastor's Perspective.
I can enjoy the debate, but you need to, yes.
Yeah. So, obviously the argument where it talks about, in Genesis that, there's no genealogy without father or mother. And so some would think, okay, there's a connection there, but it's also possible that just means they didn't have the genealogy, not that he was without father or mother in that sense. I would say, I really don't know, but like you guys, there was a time where that was a lot more compelling. I think it's important that people hear these options, though, because when I went to Bible college, it was a lot of times it kind of felt more like you were getting, the one views of things, right? Like you would read in Ezekiel or in Isaiah, and you would be told this is the fall and this is where that took place. And then later you start thinking, well, is that exactly what that is? Or you would be told that, Melchizedek is the pre-incarnate Christ. And then you would start to think, well, maybe there's another way of understanding Melchizedek, maybe that he was the king of Salem, because Melchizedek, it just, means king of righteousness from Salem. And so that's a literal place. So perhaps that's a literal king in a literal place that was paid homage to. And so that's a good explanation. And that's why it's important to give people these different options that are on offer, so that if you only get told there's one way to see it, and then later down the road you start hearing about all these different options on offer, you start getting overwhelmed perhaps with doubt. And that is some of how my doubts started getting triggered, being put in such a tight theological box. And I feel like it's really helpful to realize that you don't have to try to speed coming to a place of getting all of your doctrines down. You want to be right on kind of the essential Christian doctrines, and then enjoy learning. Don't try to conquer it. So take time to study the different options that we're talking about. And then after studying the options, then make a conclusion based off what you see best can be proven from the scriptures. And so when it comes to these two things, it's kind of like the sons of God and daughters of men. I think that there can be some good arguments on both sides, which leaves me a believer in the fact that there is a proper explanation from God's perspective. I just doubt that I have the right explanation with certainty on some of those more cryptic passages.
Yeah, and let me just say that Bobby did not go to Biola University. That's not the college to which he refers.
Right. No, and that, yeah.
But I would say that's part of what, like, we do. Like, I think the reason we're even having this conversation about Melchizedek and the Archangel Michael is there's something weird about Melchizedek. So if that's something weird, could be, is that a pre-incarnation of Christ? So that's, without beginning, without end, king of peace and righteousness. Or that's where the explanation of it being the Archangel Michael, because there's something strange about Melchizedek. I mean, he's there and then shows up in Hebrews as well. So I do want to affirm what Bobby's saying. This is where, and what I would say, Tasha, is just you're kind of having conversations that would be really in-depth theological conversations with more than one view. And if you're kind of new to this, you say you're recently drawn to God, again, this is the kind of stuff that what we might call disputable matters. Like there's 4 guys here who love Jesus, but Brian Perez hasn't given his opinion, but we've all given our opinion. And we're all like, hey, that could be, but we're not 100% sure. And what I would say is there's a lot of, you're getting some very fine points of theology. And again, I lead a university, in our Bible and theology majors. I just tweeted it, 100% retention rate from year to year, which is, by the way, very unusual and stunning.
Amazing.
But it is kind of crazy. But 100% students stayed. That's typically not the case.
It is amazing.
But what I would say is that this is, we even here, this is the kind of stuff that we would probably sit around a campfire and talk about when we got nothing else to do, but there's a lot more essential, important doctrines that I want you to master before who Melchizedek was.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say pastorally to you, Tasha.
But it's fun.
It is fun.
And it's good to go on those adventures.
We're having fun right here.
And the one thing I would say,
and you're wrong.
Michael always gets thrown into a weird spot, though. I mean, come on, the Jehovah's Witnesses think he's Jesus.
Everything. The Mormons.
Yeah.
That stuff. Everyone's got something about Archangel Michael.
Yeah, whenever you see the Archangel Michael appear, okay, there's going to be some weird twist here.
Well, I think part of the reason is that we have these appearances in the Old Testament that are either like the captain of the host of the army of the Lord. Is that Joshua chapter 5? I think it is.
Yeah.
Like, who are you? Are you for us or your enemies? No, I'm the captain of the host of the army of the Lord, and they bow down and worship him. So the question is, like, who is that? So it's some sort of. So either it's a pre-incarnate Christ, God the Son has always been, so it could be a Christophany. Well,
I think that one was.
Yeah,
sure.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. But if it's not, because it doesn't have to be, it's got to be somebody significant. Is that Michael, Archangel Michael? Well, they wouldn't bow down to Archangel Michael, but so I'm with you. Yeah. But I think that's why. So Archangel Michael seems to be kind of a fill-in for the pre-incarnate Christ, or because he's such a significant figure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Bobby?
One last thing I would want to offer up too is part of discipleship, because we're living in a culture that there's so much doubt. I think it could be wise for pastors and church leaders to prepare new converts when they become Christians, to get ahead for them by saying things like, now, we live in a world of social media. You're going to read all kinds of things out there. Don't freak out and don't panic. There's lots of opinions on these things. And in teaching them things like a lot of questions you might hear could send you into a panic. Know that these aren't new questions. There are solid answers, and you just got to rest in that. And then also saying things like, and realize that there's different interpretations, and sometimes these aren't break faith issues, and it's important to check those out, and don't rush your studies. Enjoy that process. Anything we can do to help people to take away the surprise that might scare them in a bout with doubt. And I just say that as a guy that thinks a lot about what could have helped me be protected from some of the doubts that I ended up struggling with. And I think some of that is just being slower to form your doctrines, knowing there's different interpretations, knowing that there's good answers. So if you come across an apparent contradiction in the Bible, don't assume, give the Bible the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I don't know the answers to every apparent contradiction, but those things used to really shake me up when I was in seminary going through the Synoptic Gospels. And what has ended up happening now is I've just seen that there's so many of those that I've just been through the process of reconciling. And even if I don't know the answer to how I stand on something, I know that there is an explanation that can stand. And that just gives me a lot of comfort. And also remember that certainty is not what it means to become a Christian, because no worldview offers that. And so sometimes people get messed up and feel like they're struggling with doubt, but to walk away from Christianity is only to walk into another worldview where you're going to inherit another set of doubts. So we're finite and we're limited, and we just need to realize that the beautiful thing about Christianity is what saves us is belief in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus on behalf of our sin.
888-564-6173. Got a few minutes left to get your question answered. We've got Brian Broderson, Bobby Conway, and Ed Stetzer here till 4 p.m. Pacific time. Let's go to Virginia. Here's Elise. You are on. Welcome. How can we help you?
Hi. I am calling because I am in counseling, and my counselor wants to do something called EMDR, and I was curious if you all have heard of it and if it's okay, in your opinion, for Christians to do that.
EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. Bobby Conway, do you know about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a therapy that's used to help people, break through some of the traumas that they have. And it works for some people, and there's been great effects for them. And I'll use my son as an example. He's had a lot of EMDR therapy and has found that incredibly useful. I don't really understand all that's going on with it, but they're taking you through a process, and it's an interesting process, and it almost can sound a little bit cryptic, but I don't see that you're doing anything unbiblical. If they're just helping you kind of capture some of these traumas that have taken root. And there's lots of different types of experiments that counselors will use that they think can be effective. They'll do deep breathing. They'll have you try to stay present by walking and not making judgments about things. Like, for example, if you go for a walk, you're trying to just take the emotion out of things by learning to just say, you're trying to just walk and be present. And so you're stating facts versus making emotional judgments on things. And so they'll talk about how there can be a difference there and how it can actually help you to be emotionally regulate. Some of that stuff can sound a little bit weird, and I would concede that. But if you think about it, we all want to learn to be present. We all want to learn to make sure that, we're not overreading things that we need to. And so just learning how to be observant, to be present, to be mindful. So some people, that's Buddhism. Well, all truth is God's truth. And so it's not like Buddhism corners the market on trying to be present. God reveals himself as I am, the present one. And so the truth of the matter is there's a lot of emotions that cause us from recognizing the great I am, the present one. And when I have sensed God's presence, it's because I feel like I'm actually being present and I'm not being robbed by future or past emotions like guilt, shame, fear, regret, and future emotions like or would be like fear and anxiety and worry. And so sometimes those emotions come in and crowd you out. And so they'll take you through different things that can help you. So I don't have a problem with that, but just make sure that they're not trying to get you to be, unbiblical in any way.
Elise, thank you for your phone call on Pastor's Perspective.
I got a question. I want to ask these two guys.
Are you allowed to do that? Pastor's Perspective? Your mic off.
Well, I can kind of do anything because
you are the king of all media.
I'm in the driver's seat here, so
at least for 6 more weeks. Right?
I want to ask you guys. Hey,
what happens in 6 weeks?
You haven't heard?
No.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you guys this,
yeah.
and you both would be familiar with this because we all three we read a lot and so forth. But a lot lately, I'm reading. People are longing for the transcendent, and the world. The people once understood the world as an enchanted world, and it's no longer enchanted. And so I hear this, and I read this stuff, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And I think in a certain group of people that probably is the case. But I think there's so many people in the world. I don't think they're consciously thinking about anything like that. I think they're just living
Charles
from
Taylor stuff.
Yeah, the Charles Taylor stuff and all of that sort of high-minded, philosophical type of stuff, But
highfalutin, them educated highfalutin people probably teach at universities.
But I'm just thinking about how, let's get real here. The average person is not walking around thinking about how it's a disenchanted world. The average person is just trying to, get from day to day. And that brings me just down to this. I think sometimes we just need to simplify things. And I think the gospel, although the gospel is profound on a million different levels, and we can dive as deep as we can, there is a simplicity to it as well that just the average person who's not thinking about anything except, man, I hate my job. And I wish, I wish my life was different. Just the relationship with Jesus is where it starts.
Yep.
The music starts to play. It sounds like an altar call is about to come. And I think people are seeking meaning.
Yeah.
And so meaning is not the same thing as always searching for the transcendent.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the highfalutin crowd is, I don't know if you said or I said, there are people who are seeking for that as well, and they're wrestling through, basic questions of who they are and what that matters in the universe. But for most people, they're just seeking for meaning. And I think the truth of the gospel is the true story of the whole world, and that gives meaning to me and all of existence.
Yeah. And there is a purpose for your life.
There is.
Bobby, 4 seconds. Never mind, not even 4 seconds.
Bye, Bobby.
Pastor's Perspective is sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America.